morning, everyone, and thank you for coming. So I welcome all of you. I'd like to introduce Jen Cavedo. She is our certified interpreter who would like to make an announcement.
Buenas tardes a todos. Si alguien ocupa interpretación al español, aquí está el equipo aquí atrás en el cuarto. Gracias.
I'd like to turn it over to Grand River Health CEO, Jim Combs.
Thank you for coming to listen to our message tonight. Tonight we hope to talk a little bit about the past growth and expansion of the hospital, our biggest challenges that we're facing today, and how we hope to solve those. Our mission, vision, values for the organization, I think, has been an important part of this, both in the organization's success and in creating the current problem that we have today. A lot of organizations that you go to, you might feel like that mission, vision, values is just a plaque on the wall, but we've really worked hard to live and breathe that here and give good service. Some of you may remember an old reputation from 15 or more years ago, and it has a lot to do with changing that old reputation and growing and the success that we've had and our current constraints that we have. A quick look at the district and the numbers of people and amount of services that we provide. Almost 31,000 people in the service area that we're providing healthcare to, 800 employees. It's actually north of 800 these days. That makes us the biggest employer here in Rifle, and that wasn't always the case. When I first came here, we had a little over 200 employees. We were not the biggest employer at that point in time, and a little over 50 physicians at this point. And that's turned into a little over 57,000 visits in the clinics this last year. Various services in the hospital, over 85,000 services provided, and 25,000 Meals on Wheels delivered to our community. All of the different services that the hospital provides, and I'm not going to go through every one of them so you can breathe a sigh of relief on that, but what I would say is if we looked at this 15 years ago, this list was probably about half of what you see up here. It's a lot more services, a lot more ability to stay close to home and get your needs taken care of here without having to drive really far. Rehab, same thing. The scope and depth and breadth of those services much bigger today than it was several years ago. And our care center as well. So Grand River's had a pretty big impact on the health of the community and the convenience and ease of getting health care here in the community. But does it affect the community in other ways? And it does. There's a big financial impact that the hospital has on the community. Back around when we started, a little over 200 employees. Today, over 800 employees. That's a very significant growth. To put that in perspective, when we expanded the hospital and replaced the care center several years ago, we had made a promise of 200 new jobs to the community. So I started looking at, the Denver metro area compared to our area, and looked at the relationship between those. How many jobs do you think it would take in Denver to have the same economic impact that 200 jobs had here, in the Rifle, Battlement, Silt area? And the multiplier in terms of population, it's 100 to 1. So it would take 20,000 jobs in Denver to have the same economic impact that 200 jobs has had here in our area. You can bet that would be front page news for months. That would be an incredibly big impact, not just the Denver area, but our state. And that's the impact that these initiatives have had here. We spend about $100 million locally in terms of payroll and supplies and vendors. Those employees and those vendors turn around and spend the money again a time or two. We think the overall impact is about 230 million in our area. That's a huge impact, from housing to restaurants to shopping. Hospitals are, especially in small communities, hospitals are a really critical piece of those communities. And it doesn't take too long to find a community without its hospital to see the impact that that's had. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Anik to take us through a little bit of history.
Right. My name's Anik Pruitt, and I am the Community Relations Director for Grand River Health, and I've had the privilege of working at Grand River since 2011. So that's 14 years. It's like, boy, it just seems like yesterday. So again, thank you so much for coming. I think it's important, before we tell you where we're going, that we look back and tell you where we've been. One of the first things I did as Community Relations Director in 2011 was to look back and learn about the history of Grand River Health. So I'm not going to go decade by decade with you, but I think it's important that you understand where we've been. So in this right here is Vanville. Vanville was actually located, this was in the 1950s, was located north of town, about where Wells Fargo and the pool is. And this was the first community hospital that Rifle had. It was really a glorified Quonset hut. And it served the needs of the community the best it could. One of our nurses, Dorothy Woodington, told us about Vanville and what it was like. And you had women on one side of the Quonset hut who were giving birth, and then the men were on the other side. There was very little privacy, and certainly not what one would call a modern hospital. So in 1961, the community got together, it was the ranching and business community, and decided that they really needed a hospital here. And the way they were going to get it was to establish a hospital district. So they went business to business and door to door and got a petition signed. There were approximately 2,200 voters at the time, and over 1,800 people signed that petition, and that actually formed Grand River Hospital District. And in 1962, Claggett Memorial Hospital was built in the same spot that the Grand River Health Care Center is now. So it was on the top of 5th Street. And that hospital served the community for many decades. And in 1968, right next to it, Edie Moore Care Center was built. And so over the years, there were some years where the hospital was more profitable than the care center, and other years where the care center was more profitable than the hospital. But they both really helped care for the community the best they could. Now, in those days, doctors' lives were much different. So we had 3 to 4 doctors at a time. But not only did they see patients in the clinic, they rounded on patients in the morning, both in the hospital and the care center. And at the time, Claggett Memorial Hospital also delivered babies. So sometimes they were working 24/7 for weeks at a time. As you can imagine, that didn't really bode well for work-life balance. And so there was an awful lot of turnover with our doctors. Sometimes we would have 4 doctors, sometimes we would have 2 doctors, sometimes we would have no doctors. And the nurses would take care of the patients. So as you can imagine, life in rural hospital America in Rifle, Colorado was a bit different than it is now. So over the years, things went up and down for the hospital, but they managed. But in the 90s, there began to be a downward trend, one that the board of directors was very concerned about. And they said, we're going to have to make a change because we don't know if we're going to be able to survive this. So they went and hired a management company and said, what is it that we need to do in order to sustain this hospital? It's very important for the community. We provide a lot of jobs, and we provide care for our community, which is why the hospital district was established. So this board or management company actually told the board, they said, what you're going to need to do is figure out a way to keep more services here locally, you're going to need to hire specialists and you're going to need to hire surgeons and then do those services here. If you can't do that, and we can help you, but if you can't do that, then things are not going to get better. So they said what they needed to do was go to the community. Well, they did some studies first to see if the hospital that they had at the time was going to be able to do those things. And it was determined that it could for the time being, but they really were going to need to remodel to become more up to date. Well, construction materials during that time, there was a lot of asbestos in the construction materials. Therefore, to remodel was going to cost an awful lot of money. And then they looked at building a new hospital, and that was actually going to be cheaper. So they went to the voters in 2001 and asked them if they would be willing to support a new hospital. This is the land in 2000 that we are on. Now, if you notice, there's not a lot there. As a matter of fact, the only thing you can see is the McDonald's and then the Alpine Bank Central Ops building, but there was no Walmart, there was no Sonic, there was no Hampton Inn, there was nothing here. And I can tell you, I lived here during the time, and I remember a lot of the community was going, is that the best place to build a hospital? There's nothing there. Of course, in hindsight, that was brilliant, right? So in 2001, the voters approved an $11.5 million tax bond, and the land was acquired on Airport Road. And much to the community's delight, a brand new hospital was built, and the grand opening was in May of 2003. And everybody came out. It was a very busy day. It was a beautiful spring day. So this is the original hospital. For those of you who have eaten in our cafe, that wall used to be the exterior of the hospital. That's always a fun story to tell people. It's like, oh my gosh, that was so small. And the clinic was on this side over here, and then the ER and med-surg of the hospital was on that side. So then we had what we like to call the go-go years. So this was a big boom, and the boom allowed us to bring in the monies from the property taxes to be able to do the things that that management company said we needed to do. It gave us the money to go ahead and hire the doctors that we needed to hire, put things into place that needed to happen, be able to invest in the latest and greatest equipment so we could serve our community to the best of our ability. We also purchased the Battlement Mesa Clinic. There was a clinic in Battlement Mesa that was actually run by St. Mary's, and we were able to purchase that. And it was, if you go in the Wayback Machine, it actually was a small little office on that side of the strip mall where Clark's Market is. And then also a need that was identified by the oil and gas industry and all the construction industries is that they needed occupational health and safety and physical therapy. So we were able to purchase or rent the space on the other side of the strip mall. So people, it wasn't exactly convenient. You had the little office over here, and then if people needed physical therapy, if they needed physical therapy, they walked or they got back in their car and they drove over there. But it met the needs of the community. So we hired all those doctors, and remember, we were just in that little clinic space, and all of a sudden we started running out of room. So we said, well, we're going to need to be able to expand. And so in 2009, this building was built. Obviously the conference center, which was a huge need for the community at the time. There was no meeting space in Rifle at all. And I remember the CEO at the time, and I was at the chamber, said, do you think that if we built meeting space, the community would use it? Yes, they would use it. And they continue to today. So we were able to add, on the second floor, we were able to put all the primary care docs and also our specialty services. First floor was an expanded physical therapy. Physical therapy used to be located at the front of the hospital, where later Changing Lifestyles was for many years. And we were able to do this with cash reserves from the oil and gas boom. So then, in 2014, Battlement Mesa was also a growing community, and they wanted a better clinic. So we were able, again, with reserves that we had saved during the boom years, we're able to build that with reserves for about $16 million. And that community embraced that clinic and does to until this day. And we send a lot of specialists out there. We also have physical therapy, lab, diagnostic imaging, all those services out there to serve that community. Then in 2016, with all the addition of the specialty services that we added, block time in the surgery, we had 2 surgery suites at the time. The block time was starting to get hard to have for a lot of our surgeons. So we decided to go ahead and expand our surgery area and add a shell space in our surgery area so that we could expand in the future. So we went from 2 surgery suites to 4. And then we had a big ask, and this one was too much for us to do with any reserves. In 2017, we went to the voters and asked them to approve an $89 million bond so that we could build the care center and also build a patient wing to expand more services that the community had identified that they would really like if we could provide for them. We did much of what we're doing right now with you all and talked to the community. We were out there, made presentations to anybody who would listen to us. And we're happy to say that the voters were very supportive of that bond and passed it 66% to 34%. And we started construction immediately, and I'm also very proud to say that we were able to complete the construction of the care center on time and on budget despite having COVID. And that opened in February of 2021. And in June of 2021, we were able to open the patient wing and introduce some new services, including cardiac rehab, which I will say has been busy from the moment that we opened the doors. And I think that's because the community said, we really want you to do this, we'll support it if you build it. And it truly has been, if you build it, they will come. And we did create 200 new jobs as we promised the community. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Coleman, who's going to talk a little bit about our biggest challenges.
As Anique said, my name is Dr. Kevin Coleman. I just want to say it's been an honor and a privilege to serve at Grand River for the last 17 years as a family medicine physician and ER doc. In the last 10 years, I've been the chief medical officer for the organization. So I hope that by watching the presentation thus far, you can see that we worked very, very hard to achieve our goal of bringing quality care close to home for our community. And the way we've been able to accomplish that is twofold. One is by listening to you, the community, what do you want, what you need closer to home. And the second thing is by being forward thinking. I always appreciate the fact that I think we're a very forward-looking organization. And when we look forward, we can see that there's some challenges ahead. One of the biggest challenges is Colorado Mesa University did an economic forecast in 2025, and they are expecting our population to surge in this county. Right now, or in 2020, there were 61,000 people living in Garfield County. Their estimates are that by 2050, we'll see a 50% increase in population in Garfield to the tune of 92,000 people living here. Similarly, Mesa County currently has about 155,000 people living in its county, and they're expecting another 50% growth as well for 214,000. So we're at capacity in a lot of ways in the services that we offer with the population that we have. With any type of population growth going forward, I think we're gonna have a hard time meeting those needs of the health of our community. You know, we worked really hard, as we've said, to kind of increase the level of care that we offer here, and the community has responded. Last year we saw 55,000 patients in our primary care clinic alone, which when compared to 2011 is 81% increase. Our specialty care visits, we've hired a lot of new specialists over the years, and last year we saw just shy of, well, that's hard to say, just shy of 10,000 people in our specialty care for a 260% increase in patient visits. I think our ER volumes have gone up, but I think it's more commensurate with the growth of the population growth of the community. We are in the same space as when the hospital opened in 2002. So 10,000 patients in that space is actually kind of cramped. So a 37% increase in that. And then we really would like to expand our after-hour services even further. We understand that we live in a community that's got a little higher cost of living. As a result, there's a lot of dual income families out there. And when both of you are working, it's hard to find time during the regular business hours to get your family in to see a provider. So we would like to expand the after-hour services going forward. One area where we've seen tremendous growth is our rehab services. Keith Maurer, our director of rehab, has done a great job of recruiting and retaining just some high-quality therapists. The community has really responded to that. Last year we saw 17,700 patient visits for physical therapy, for a 220% increase over the last 13 years. We've seen, well, we didn't have speech therapy, but last year we saw 2,000 patients in that capacity. And then occupational therapy, we had a part-time occupational therapist in 2011. Last year we saw 3,365 visits in OT. So between all of it, we're around 24,000 patient visits in our rehab department. And if you've been over in rehab, it's a pretty small space for that kind of volume of people. So because we can't really hire more therapists because we don't have the space to accommodate them, you know, we are seeing a lot of lengthening wait times to get in for much needed therapy. Similarly, our physicians network's grown pretty dramatically over the last 13 years. You know, as one of the 12 originals 13 years ago, 15 years ago, 17 years ago when I was here, you know, as I set out to build my practice in Battlement Mesa, I said, how do you do that? And for me, the answer was one patient at a time. Take the very best care I could of every person that walked through the door, make myself available to them at all times, and really try to make connections, because when you make a connection with the patient, you build trust. When you have trust, you have follow through. When you have follow through, you have better outcomes. And it was, you know, we had a lot of success with that. And we've tried to hire doctors that kind of fit that mold, really good at making connections with their patients. Dr. Vargas on the far left was Colorado's Family Physician of the Year 4 years ago. Dr. Consuela and Dr. Feeney have been named, you know, Citizen's Choice Physician of the Year several times. Dr. Harris was actually the team doctor for CU football and the Olympic ski team in orthopedics. And then, again, we really do try to listen to you, the community, as much as we can. So our most recent hires are Dr. Vanderbrook, who's in gastroenterology, won the Bronze Star serving our country in Afghanistan. And then our newest addition is Dr. Melrose, who's was just named the Locals' Choice Dermatologist of the Year, which is kind of cool because she's only been here 4 months. So she better not lose next year. So,
No pressure.
yeah, no pressure. So we really try to recruit people that fit the needs of our community and resonate with the care that you guys are seeking. So just kind of recap, you know, we're out of clinic space to meet any expanding service needs. You know, our physical therapy space is very insufficient. You know, we're currently even leasing space in Rifle Commons, which is nothing more than a Band-Aid. It will help, but it isn't a long-term fix by any stretch. We're unable to hire any additional needed providers in primary care, mental health, physical therapy, because of that lack of space. And we are seeing longer wait times, in particular in mental health and therapy. I don't know if it's quite 6 to 8 weeks any longer, but it is 4 to 6 weeks. So to kind of talk about some proposed solutions, I'll give it back to Jim.
To say we really need to secure some funding to be able to provide a solution for this. And we have an opportunity under the bond that was issued back in 2017, you know, to replace the care center and expand the hospital. We have an opportunity to issue some additional debt under that bond without increasing taxes for the community. But what it would do is extend the final maturity by 8 years, from 2037 to 2045. And we're considering, putting that on the ballot this fall, pending feedback from the community. We're doing meetings like this where we've had some mailers out to the community, and there will be a survey coming out very shortly that will all help us, in making that decision. The use of that bond, would be to construct a new building, actually just out here on the corner of Megan and Airport, where that Grand River sign is right there. And the services that we would move into that building would be physical therapy, so they would continue to have room to grow. And then some of the surgical specialties that work very closely with physical therapy, like orthopedics, podiatry, and they would work out in there. That would free up space here in our existing space where physical therapy is, to remodel that space and turn that into clinic space that would then give additional room to hire more primary care doctors and continue to be able to grow and provide timely service there. We would like to be able to complete some shelf space that we have in the surgical suite area to create a surgical space that would accommodate higher levels of technology, the surgical robots that they have. And that becomes more and more critical to our future as surgeons are being trained in residency and prepared, to take care of their communities. They are all being trained how to do surgery on the robots. And if we don't have one, at some point in the future, it's going to get harder and harder to attract, good surgeons to come here and continue for us. And then lastly, some expansion of our dietary services. When we started years ago, we were providing meals for 200 employees, a few patients, and probably only delivered 5,000 or 6,000 Meals on Wheels to the community. Now it's meals to 800 employees, a lot more patients, a lot more Meals on Wheels, 25,000. And I think those are the major areas that we're looking at. The building would sit here on the corner of Airport and Megan. Because of the slope of the land, it would be a 3-story building on the back, 2 stories on the front side, and it would give good proximity, for people to go back and forth between the two facilities. A rendering of what that might look like from the bottom side of the 3-story building. Orthopedics, rehab would be the primary services in that. I often get a question somewhere in here, when we're talking about relocating physical therapy out there. Does anybody use the pool up here in their rehab services to date? So what about the pool?
It's itsy bitsy.
Yes. It is small, and it's also almost 20 years old, and the water and things is hard on rifle water is hard on the plumbings, and it's nearing the end of its life. So it's not too expensive to take that old pool out at this point. It is really expensive to put a new one in. And as we looked at the new standard of care and what's going on out there, they're now using those never-ending pools for therapy, and they're above ground. So we could purchase a new pool, would sit above ground, would actually be smaller than the one in there. The therapist no longer has to get into the pool with the patient anymore. They can just be right there on the side to assist.
So
it allows us to.
Jim, is there a zero entry in that pool?
In the pool here?
No, in the proposed new one.
No, it would not, but there would be assisted lift devices.
There's a harness lift that gets you in and out.
anyway, the benefits of all of that, you know, is really continuing to give timely service. You know, rehab is where our biggest constraints are, you know, 4 to 6 weeks to get in right now. If our surgeons don't really plan ahead as they're planning for a surgery for somebody, you know, it's tough to get in there and have timely therapy afterwards. If we don't do something soon, we'll begin to have increasing delays with primary care. You know, we're down to one office left right now that we could hire another physician into. And at some point, as the community grows and there's more demand to seek care, it's going to be harder and increasing wait times. So, and that is the downside. You know, what if this doesn't pass and we're not able to build this new space? You know, there's not going to be any immediate consequence. You'll just gradually see wait times get longer over a couple of years. And I think the most important part is being able to do this, you know, again, without a tax increase to the community, really an extension of the current one.
Jim's passing out some clickers because we have an anonymous way for you guys to vote on a couple of questions that we have for you. And as soon as he finishes passing those up, we'll put those questions up there. I would say press the correlating number hard because some clickers are more sensitive than other clickers, but there's no way to know who voted for what. So this is just a nice way for you to kind of give us feedback so that we can move forward with educating and speaking to the community in a way that would be helpful.
So our first question, you know, how do you think your neighbors and the rest of the community would respond? You know, definitely yes, probably no, definitely no, or not really sure.
So which button is B? 2. 2B, okay. Thank you.
Received or the
Okay, I think we got everybody. All right. And the last question, how would you vote? Okay. And if anybody's curious, the other groups that we've done this with mirror the results almost exactly to what you've done here tonight. You know, you think your neighbor most likely would, but you're not really sure. And you're reasonably sure that she would. Anyways, virtually identical to the employee groups plus the other community groups that we've been with so far. Anyway, thank you for your time tonight.